Well, I must tell you that there are some people saying I'm dead. And I felt I ought to come and say that I've been reincarnated in the same body. Okay, I'm going to talk about the future because I think that we're far too much trapped in the past. We have a vocabulary for what we are interested in that's at least 200 years old. And our reality boxes are locked into the definitions of the vocabulary, you know. But things are going to change. And I know they are, and that's what I'm going to talk about today, if I can hold it together that long. You know, the future is a very nervous frontier. And that's why we like what happened in the past. And we model our models after what has happened in the past. Do you all understand what a model is? You know, that's the way they thought about it, so it must be correct. So that we bring that model into the present, and then because we brought it into the present, those that come after us carry it into their present. Can you think of any reason why the old models should change?
Sure.
Why is that?
They're imperfect.
Pardon?
They're imperfect.
Oh, Dr. Tiller says they're imperfect. But that doesn't mean they can change.
Oh, of course not.
Oh, see? I always win when I talk to Dr. Tiller. Yeah, imperfect models taken as doctrine and carried and taught to us, and we're likely to do the same thing. But things are going to change because science is changing, and science is opening up a world or a model that hasn't existed since 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 years. And actually, the model that science is opening up is probably not the same exactly, but it's a model similar to what you find in the Sanskrit language of at least 3,000 years ago. And if you will bear with me, I'd like to talk about that and tell you about that. Is that all right? Okay. Another thing I'm going to point out is that there's a difference between making theories about something or the facts, the phenomena we're interested in, and actually experiencing them. I am an experientialist. I mean, you can have an intellectual image of something, you can have an intellectual model of something, but unless you experience it, it's just purely intellectual. Would you agree?
Yes.
And one of the things that went around parapsychology is that it never went into experientialism because they had to follow, or they wanted to make parapsychology phenomena acceptable to science. So, you know, if somebody experiences something, you can't actually drag the experience into the laboratory, right? Because when you experience it, it happens like this. And I'm going to give you an example. One is on a vacation in the mountains. And one is walking up a path that is going up the mountainside, observing the great scenery, right? Have any of you ever done that? And one is walking around saying, wow, this is great, and this is so forth and so on, and suddenly the body stops. The body stops. One is continuing looking and doesn't realize that the body has stopped. And then it becomes aware the body has stopped, and the body takes 3 steps backwards, and the cliff falls away, right in front of this person, and suddenly the knees get all so forth and so on, and then this one walks over and looks down there where the body would be, mangled, right? That's an experience that doesn't involve consciousness. And then one says, I'd better go back to the lodge. When one goes back and drinks 6 martinis. Now, you can't drag a thing like that into parapsychology laboratory, right? But this is what we're interested in, right? We're interested in this kind of thing. That can't even be called a premonition because it wasn't even conscious. What would you call it? Well, we know it's subconscious, but what would you call the experience? An anomaly. That's the best word we can get up for it? We don't even have a word for it. The parapsychology of psychic literature does not have a word for that kind of thing. It has a word if you get an impression that something's going to happen. That's called a premonition. But that's after the fact, right? You have to wait to see if the premonition is going to come actualize or not. But so we have a word for that, but we don't have a word for the most famous phenomenon in human history, what actually must be the most famous enduring phenomenon in actual history. Something in our system saves our lives. Do you understand what I mean now? Experiential? Well, you're not. So what does parapsychology test when you drag something into the laboratory? Give me some examples. Are you dead-headed tonight or what? Come on, give me some examples. What do parapsychologists test? Is there any parapsychologist here? Telepathy. Psychokinesis. Precognition. Intervention. Intervention's getting quite near what I was talking about. Michael Persinger does what?
He puts a skidoo helmet on people and he shows like pictures.
Yes, sir. I have been in that helmet many times. The definition of parapsychology, as found in Parapsychology Sources of Information, published in 1973, says thusly: parapsychology is a modern and more restrictive term for psychical research, the field which uses the scientific method to investigate phenomena for which there appear to be no normal, that is, sensory, explanations. Basically, this refers to phenomena subsumed under the general term psi that refers to the building blocks of telepathy, clairvoyance, precognition, psychokinesis. Did you know that's the working definition of parapsychology? Well, here it is. I printed it out large so I could read it. You know, I'm getting old. Do you know how old I am? How old do I look? What? Oh. I've been around for 72 years, this lifetime. Thank you. I appreciate it. What's wrong with this definition that I just read you? Pardon? No experiential in it, right? But there's something else that's odd about it. Well, that's one thing, yes.
But when they say not normal sensory, there's over 18 or 24 sensories, and that's not even referred to in that. So the definition of sensory is too limiting in that context, isn't it?
Answer me, audience. Answer his question. Nobody can answer that?
No, we agree with it.
Pardon?
We agree with it. Or at least I think the silence means that we're in agreement with what he said.
With what I'm saying?
And what, yes.
Yes. But there's something really odd about it. And you'll never know what it is until I point it out. There's one thing in this definition that's so taken for granted that it doesn't even appear as a question. Right? I'll read it again. I'd like to know if you can spot it. Parapsychology is a modern, more restricted form of psychical research. The field which uses a scientific method to investigate phenomena for which there appears to be no normal sensory explanations. What is the scientific method? Repeatable what? You're not quite following me. We are questioning which scientific method. Gotcha. Nobody ever thinks to say, what is this scientific method they're using? Right? Damn right. What is this current wonderful scientific method based in?
Hypothesis, test, analysis, conclusion.
It's based in materialism, which is defined the theory that physical matter is the only reality, and that all being and processes and phenomena can be explained as the manifestations or results of matter. When did that come into being? I know, but I want to know if anybody else knows. 1845. The four guys who got it together and pushed it into chemistry and then into physics were under 24 years old. And they have ruled the materialistic age. Now, the reason I'm focusing on these things here is I'm going to tell you what's happened to the only reality. See, if it was just a theory that physical matter exists and that processes and so forth and everything can blah, 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 blah and everything, but it's the only reality. This definition is taken from my trustworthy Webster's Intercollegiate Dictionary of 1974. This was still the official definition of materialism. Only reality, I'm arguing, you see. So when people say the scientific method, they're referring, by implication, to the matter is the only reality. So if there's something around that is not made by matter, is not matter or something like that, they cannot test it with the scientific method because it's not made of matter. Got it? I very seldom prepare notes, but the things I'm going to say are so earth-shaking that I thought I should. And I'm going to point out one thing that the material sciences cannot explain, account for, or even find the mental processes that go on in it is consciousness. If you can't explain consciousness, you can't explain anything we're interested in. You can explain mercantilism. You can explain atomic bombs. You can explain everything else. But there is no currently existing science of consciousness. Here's a book by this guy named Roger Penrose, who's a very famous physicist in England. It is entitled Shadows of the Mind. It is subtitled The Search for the Missing Science of Consciousness. Parapsychology should, from the get-go, have been interested in the phenomena of consciousness and not in the scientific method. I'm old enough, I'm over the hill now, I don't have to be careful anymore about what I say amongst my peers, so I'm saying it. There's no science of consciousness. How can remote viewing, telepathy, blah, 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 all these things be explained if they're functions of consciousness, and the consciousness of science is still missing in the year 2006? You see why my colleagues found me a little difficult to deal with at times? It has turned out, according to this book, you see, if I say it on my own, nobody believes me, but if somebody of this standing says it, then they have to chew on it at least a little bit. It's turned out that consciousness of science is not explainable as processes or result of matter. This book moans and groans about that for at least 100 pages. It cannot be captured by the quantifiable method. It is not quantifiable as all other aspects of matter. It does ask, I must say, what new physics we need to understand consciousness and the mind as well. Now, what has happened to the only reality? I tried to bring along a few things. First of all, this is Scientific American. I don't know what the date is, but here's the cover. Has science missed half the brain? The brain is a matter thing, you know, and scientists have now begun to realize that they've missed half of it. Well, there it is, Dr. Tiller.
I read it too.
You wrote it too?
I read it.
Oh, you've read it. Good. Isn't that funny? I think it's hilarious. They've been researching the brain for all this time and they missed half of it. These are the glial cells that were thought for a long time to merely bring nutrition to the synapses in the neurons, the vitamins that they needed to work on and things like that. But now it's been discovered that the glial cells carry at least 100,000 times worth of what we might think of as digitalized information as well as nutrition to the neurons. Did I get it right? Yes. Specialty of Dr. Persinger in Canada, who's been locked out of his laboratory because he's gone so far advanced in the materialistic sciences that something had to be done about him. Did you know that? A mini inquisition up there. Laurentian University, right. Are you going to give part of this lecture? Can you read this? Parallel universes. Now, quantum physics says the entire universe might be a hologram. Are you a hologram? Do you know what a hologram is? Tell me. Somebody who shook their head tell what a hologram is. No, it's not. It's an interstice of crossing light beams. So, you know, the ancients said we're made of light, everything's made of light anyway. That's what they meant. It's probably a hologram. Since we can pinch our holograms, it might not be too real. New dimensions, multiple dimensions have been theoretically discovered and proposed. See, you can meet yourself in another dimension. Scientific American thought the advent of the parallel universes thing was so important that they published a special little issue on it. Isn't that wonderful? The venerable Scientific American who was strictly materialistic for 120 years. Do you know what the quantum realms are? Well, with these discoveries here, do you think that matter is the only reality? No. Dark matter has been discovered. He's winking at me. He's my nemesis, you know. Yeah. You know what dark matter is? They do not know that. And would you shut up? I think I should ask him to shut up because they've also discovered dark energy. Do they know what dark matter is?
No.
Thank you, Dr. Tiller. Do they know what dark energy is? They've also discovered subtle, sexy, erotic, all kinds of energies. These are the words they use to identify them. The reason I brought this up is because astronomers and scientists began to discover that there was more stuff in the universe than matter alone could account for. So they've now worked it up. It's been shifting around the percentages of matter and all these other things and so forth and so on to where the matter as the only reality only now accounts for 4 to 7% of the universe. Scientists are saying that, not me. If I said it, they'd have thrown me out of the International Remote Viewing Association even. But matter's gone. I mean, it is not, well, it's here, of course, and we're trapped in it. But as the only reality for the only science, or the only science of matter has now begun to discover that matter is not the only reality. And do you think the media tell you that? I wish I could see you better. These lights are terrible. So here it is. Physical matter accounts for only something like 4 to 7% of the universe. Now, there's something else really interesting about all this other stuff. Did you ever look up stuff in a dictionary? Did you know it's a perfectly good word? You know, it's meant to identify something that exists, but they don't know what it is, so they can legitimately call it stuff, you know. Who did that? I can see you better. The thing about all this other stuff is that it all interpenetrates each other. Does anybody here know what the word interpenetrate means? To penetrate between, within, or throughout, to mutually penetrate, to spread, or diffuse through, to permeate. Your physical body is sitting here, and all this other stuff is interpenetrating it all of the time. Did you know that? You didn't know that? You should subscribe to a few science magazines and instead of watching CNN, and you might find out about it. All right, so matter alone is not going to tell us what the universe is made of. Matter alone is not going to tell us what consciousness is made of. Matter alone is not going to tell us what telepathy consists of, or precognition, or even remote viewing, right? So that part of what we're interested in studying is over with officially. And I'm going to tell you, there's a really cute story that shows where it has begun to change everything. Interpenetrating. There was in the medieval ages, a term that was used, quintessence, which was thought to interpenetrate everything and was, some people thought back then, the basic building blocks of reality in the universe. Is that right, Tiller?
Yeah, they're using it.
Well, it's come back now. I have a book on it. If you have a book on something, you think you know what you're talking about. There were also, in the Middle Ages and even earlier, back into Greek times, the word ether, or aether, which was thought to be the same, interpenetrating everything, including matter. There was also in Sanskrit the word akasha, or akasa. Are you, some of you familiar with that? Except in Sanskrit, the akasa was loaded with intuitive information. Did you realize that? That if you could get into the akasa, you could find out anything. Sometimes it was called the perpetual record, the record of everything that had happened or will happen, and so forth and so on. And these terms are drifting back into our postmodern sciences. You see, the modern age was firmly locked into materialism, and now that materialism has been locked down or reduced to 4%, these other things are going to become interesting. And that's why the future, what we're interested in, is going to change, because there may be some explanations in these other parts of stuff. Why does all information that's the human body process have to be explainable as physical source or processes? Are any of you asleep yet? Now, Sanskrit has a great deal to say about interpenetrating stuffs. And when Sanskrit was first translated into Western languages, you see, the interpenetrating concept, which is definitely in there. I have spent 2 years figuring this out, that there was the material level, there was this level, and they were all thought of as differently when they got translated in French and German and into English and everything. So we have the matter level, and we have the spiritual level, and we have this level, and so forth and so on. And these are thought of as distinct and separate, right? Stuff. Yeah. But they are stuff, and they're interpenetrating. And so in Sanskrit, other realities, see, I've entitled it, Sanskrit Other Realities. Oh, the quintessence book is entitled The Mystery of the Missing Mass of the Universe, the revised edition of the Fifth Essence, published in 1971 by Lawrence Krauss, Chairman of Physics at Case Western Reserve University, if you're all interested in reading that. These things are called Locas, L-O-K-A-S, and most of them are based on the root word Bhur, B-H-U-R, meaning earth, matter, material existence, and experience of man's earth world. Though the Bhur Loka refers to the material universe, and it's the lowest of the universes, the levels, whatever you want to call it. Above that, I'm going to talk about it from the English point of view. Above the Bhur Loka is the Bhuvar Loka. And when you enter the Bhur Loka, you become into matter. You are forming yourself into the material world. When you come into the Bhuvar Loka, the world of vitalistic manifestation of embodied life existence and becoming within emotions, passions, affectations, which desire is the pivot. This is called, in many mystical, the desire realm. Is any of that familiar to you? Just becoming matter doesn't do anything. You have to have desires and passions too. If you didn't have those, what would your physical body be? a blob or something like that. Okay. Just between the Bhuvar Loka and the Bur Loka, earth and the desire principle is the realm of the entangled mind. It's in Sanskrit. The entanglements between physicality and the passions, and that ends up with the entangled mind, So if you can't get above those three lokas, you're sort of trapped in what is called the wheel of rebirth until you can get out of it. This is in Sanskrit, but I have a punchline that brings them all together. Above these three lokas is the Swar Loka, the world of pure light, pure unentangled thought and feeling and becoming within a pure psychic state or plane. Is that sinking in? Matter is entangled with passions and desires or vice versa, so you have entangled things as long as you're focused in that. And the Svarloka is you lift up out of that and you're in the, I'll read it again. You should jump for joy, actually. The world of light, pure unentangled thought and feeling. Have any of you ever gone or experienced that state, condition? Come on, raise your hands. How many haven't experienced it? Well, now, there are half the people here not raising their hands at all.
How does one know within oneself if one is there?
This is not the question period. This is one of my great mentors, but he has to be controlled once in a while. Okay, there are several lokas. The Hindu mystics argue about whether there's 7 or 17. We don't need to go into that. But because I just picked out the ones that we might have a chance of recognizing. Let's see. Okay, I read that one. And I read Svarloka. That's the intuitional plane. Akasha, quintessence, in these different languages. There's the Maharloka, the world. It's described very simply as the realm of vast, V-A-S-T. We would say in English, the realm of infinity, or something like that. And that's about all it says about it. Because obviously, the writers of these things here said if you're trapped in the first three lokas, entangled in things, you probably will never see the vast. We would say vastness, but they use the noun rather than the other word. So, now we would think of these as different levels, right? Down here, down here, down here, down here. But the clincher is that the Sanskrit discusses these as all interpenetrating. So we are within matter and within all of the other realms, but we don't know where we are exactly. We know we're in matter. Does anybody here not think they're in matter? I've met a couple, actually. Interpenetrating. The Sanskrit discusses what we call consciousness, but it discusses it in slightly different terms. All of these lokas are interpenetrating each other. They're with us now, just like other dimensions interpenetrating our dimensions here. And they are also interpenetrating our consciousness. And our consciousness is a big thing of interpenetrating of these different lokas. which means that they are available to us if we can figure out how to get out of the entanglements or something like that and tap into them. So when you have a spontaneous experience of another dimension, is that explainable by science? Did you experience it in spite of that? How many here have experienced another dimension? Oh, see? Is remote viewing indicative of another dimension that transcends physical matter, energy, space, and time? Good. Have I bored you? No. This is Dr. What is your name? This is Dr. Stanislaus Ojak. He's a psychologist, right? Yes, he is. He's 92, and he's famous in backdoor experimental circles by taking pictures with the lens cap on and getting images on them. Take a bow. Stand up, take a bow. Can you all do that? Now, you see, the disappearance of the matter-only theory has got to have great repercussions starting now in the future, you know. I mean, they're scratching their head about all these different energies, dark matters, subtle energies, which Dr. Tiller is going to talk to you about tomorrow morning. And so things can't stay the same. You imagine what's going to have to be dumped that was hooked into the matter-only theory, matter-only reality theory. Can you think of what's going to be dumped?
Just an attitude.
Just what?
An attitude.
Oh. I'll let you tell them that tomorrow morning.
Try.
Have I made my point about interpenetrating stuff that has most recently been discovered by modern scientists, but which seems to have been known in a very potent language? Have any of you here studied Sanskrit a little bit? What kind of language is it? Do you find it?
Well, in what sense do you mean?
Is it gorgeous, complex?
It's extremely complex.
Yes, it's extremely complex. It's
A lot of different terms describing pretty much the same thing, but with gradations and variations.
Yes.
Very detailed.
You wonder how they ever learned it.
Language from light.
A language from light?
The direct language of light.
Ah, yes.
It's a language of consciousness.
Thank you. It's based in experiential consciousness, whereas English and all these other things are based in what you were taught, not what you've experienced. Did you know there are two types of gurus? Well, yes or no? Sit there like rocks. I lean very heavily on The Language of the Gods by Judith M. Tyberg, the second edition published in 1976, called The Language of the Gods, Sanskrit Keys to India's Wisdom. And also on Arthur and Anthony MacDowell's A Practical Sanskrit Dictionary, published in 2001. And also on the Hindu guys that ran my local magazine and newspaper and cigar store in New York, who actually had learned Sanskrit. So when I couldn't figure out a Sanskrit thing, a word, I took it up to them and I said, is this the right translation? And in the book, you know, they could, you know, it's the language of consciousness. So when a Western person translates it as an aspect of matter, I have a right to find out. So these guys in the tobacco shop said, oh no, that doesn't mean that. So I was helped by these three sources, by the way. But Judith Heiberg's book is a wonderful book. Are any of you here familiar with it?
How do you spell Tyberg?
Tyberg. In Tyberg's book, but not only there, guru is translated into English as a teacher, right? Okay. There are three different aspects to this. Number one, teachers transfer to their students only the information they are supposed to, while learners receive that information the best they can. This is in the dictionary. Got it? So, you've been taught what you've been taught, and you've learned it the best you can, and the teacher's done the best it can to transfer that information to you. And second, information that conflicts with what is taught and learned is discouraged and not taught. Have any of you ever experienced that?
Yep.
3, innate potential capacities that might conflict with what is to be taught, learned, are likewise discouraged, not taught, and not developed into reality, actuality rather. Have any of you experienced that? Were you taught remote viewing in grade 1? Why not? Were you taught telepathy in the 3rd grade? Why not? Did you ever wonder why not? I'll be easy on you here tonight. Where's my two gurus here? Okay. Tyberg, and I'm sure she's correct, defines a guru as one who has the capacity to pass on his realizations to those who seek him for wisdom. There may be an outer guru or guide who removes ignorance by the radiant light of his divine wisdom, or the inner guru, self, who is the guide working through the intuitive part of man. Have you ever been worked with intuitively by any of your teachers? Yes, I have. They're good teachers, aren't they? Yeah. Okay, there's one guru that can pass on his realizations of what he's learned, and it falls into the category of a teacher. Are you with me on this? There's a second guru, the inner guru, who is the guide working through the intuitive part of man. That's the 4th Loka he's talking about, the intuitional Loka, which we call intuition. Do we not? How many of you had intuition experiencing? I have to make sure of the audience, you know. Do you know where the word guru comes from in Sanskrit? No. It comes from the root meaning gri, G-R-I, meaning to invoke, to praise. So a guru is basically supposed to be, anyway, invoke something in his chelas or his students. What would be the most likely thing that the second guru would try to invoke in his students? Intuition. He uses his intuition to invoke the intuition category or capacities of his students. That's different from just left hemisphere teaching, isn't it? That falls sort of into a right hemisphere interaction between teacher and student. We don't know that, but they knew it way back when, these Sanskrit people. Now, have I boggled you enough so far? Yes? So, invoke means to awaken, right? to bring into existence, to turn on the switch, any of those things here. And it's done by the intuitive interpenetrating part of whatever's interpenetrating it, which is universal, apparently, because it pervades all existence. And so you can awaken intuition, and when you awaken intuition, you awaken the powers of intuition. We think of all this differently, you see. We think all of these powers are separate things. But what if they're all functions or modulations of intuition? Precognition, telepathy, so forth and so on, are just modulations of what we have translated into English from the Sanskrit as intuition. Just turning the dial on the band or something like that. And when the Sanskrit people got together, they thought they could, you have forewarnings, you have premonitions, you have this and that. These are spontaneous occurrences, right? If you work for them, you don't get them. I'm talking about the spontaneous experiential kind. Because if you don't plan to have them and they happen anyway, then they're more real, as if you try to happen and you mess it up. So these things, let's divide intuition in compartments, but it's all rotating. They're all interpenetrating with each other and everything. And at a certain modulation, you get intuition, what we would call intuition. We also could get telepathy, we could get clairvoyance, we could get traveling clairvoyance, and now remote viewing as it's now known, things like that. And these were referred to as the Siddhis, S-I-D-D-H-I-S in Sanskrit. And there's a great deal of argument among scholars about how many Siddhis there are. Some say 7, some say 50, and like philosophers like to try to outdo each other all the time. The term Siddhis, translated in English with very good authority for many, a few centuries anyway, as an attainment. And I personally believe that's a bad choice of words, because it should be translated a little bit more as becoming in an awakening of some kind on the intuitive levels. Anyhow, they're called attainments in the literature, the act of attaining, the condition of being attained, something attained, and an accomplishment. I shall now pick a few of these Siddhis and taken from the Sutras of Patanjali. Are you all familiar with that? Do you sleep with it under your pillow? Yes. Try. They're all about the Siddhis. It's all about the Siddhis. Siddhis. And he's got X amount of sutras. I forgot how many sutras there are. Tells you how to get out of one of the sutras tells you how to elevate out of the interpenetrating entangled mind, for instance. Others tell you to do this and how to do this and so forth and so on. And the sutras in Sanskrit mean thread. There's a thread, we can think of it as a thread of consciousness. And there are these little beads on it. And each one is a sutra. It's all part of consciousness. Oh, there are 95 sutras in his book. There's one sutra, Siddhi, that is called Trikala Jnani Siddhi. And the least complicated way of defining this Siddhi is given as attainment of knowledge, knowing of past, present, and future via divining deeply into an object, premonition, phenomenon, or idea. Do you know how to do that? I'm not quite sure I do, but I thought I'd ask you anyway. There's the Dharana Siddhi, concentration, the binding of deep consciousness awareness to one place, object, or idea until all aspects are revealed. We have hints of that in remote viewing, by the way. Do we not? There's the dhyana siddhi, a type of non-objective meditation or contemplation which releases you from the more undesirable lokas, such as matter, entanglements, and desires and passions. And then there's the samadhi siddhi. You have to work to attain these, you see. The balanced state to hold together completely, being one with, so as to attain unities of deep perceptions. Samyama. Oh, sorry, I missed that. Yeah, samyama, which transcends the plane of consciousness directly focused on gross physical matter only. Do you think this is not going to be rediscovered maybe 100 years from now? Because we have all of these interpenetrating universes confirmed by science. Okay, there are also the siddhis that reflect Sanskrit knowledge of telepathy, of precognition, of clairvoyance and traveling clairvoyance, which was a term that was replaced simply by clairvoyance, and the traveling part of it got lopped off, and it got to be conceptualized in the recent 30 years as out-of-body travel. You see why I had to bring notes? Sutra 3.37 identifies activities which awaken via samyama, spontaneous intuition that functions without conscious reasoning. So if you're walking along a cliff and your body stops without conscious reasoning, you take 3 steps back, what has gone on in your motor cortex? It takes the motor cortex to stop the body walking. It takes the motor cortex to move any motion at all. So the motor cortex has taken over because it or something like it sensed danger that you're too stupid up here to realize, and just move the body back without any conscious reasoning. This was known back in Sanskrit times, and I propose that it might have been known back 300,000 years ago when physical life was really tough, and the human species began to develop these life-saving intuitions and so forth. And as a matter of fact, I'm told the American Indian nations still have terms for those. So, I mean, they do go back, they predate Sanskrit. Parasita, the city Parasita, knowledge of others' mental image pictures. What does that mean in our English? What? Mind? Speak up. Mind reading, right. Parasita. The actual whole word is Patya Yasha Parasita Janaman. Is that right? You I don't blame you. Yeah, the knowledge of others' mental image pictures is obtained via this siddhi. We refer to that as mind reading or telepathy, right? What is the most hated of the superpowers or the siddhis? Which one? Telepathy. Nobody wants their minds read. Do you want your mind read? Yeah. Here's a copy of the New York Times for Tuesday, January 2006, January 10th. Can you read it? can read minds. These cells were discovered in about 1996 by 2 Italian researchers examining the prefrontal cortex of the brain in macaque monkeys. And they began to notice that macaque monkeys could look at each other and then get mutually excited about something and so forth. And they found the firing cells in the premotor cortex of the brain. The odd thing was that the one monkey who had an intention that the second monkey didn't like was transmitted somehow from the first monkey to the second monkey, or vice versa. But the same cells were firing in both brains, exactly the same patterns. So the premotor cortex was duplicating what was going on, and for that reason they didn't quite call them telepathy yet. They called them mirror neurons. This monkey's premotor cortex was mirroring what was going on here, and then they gave a definition for it. What was being exchanged was the intentions and motives of the first monkey to the second monkey. The mind reading of intentions, I say intentions and motives, yes. There's a reading, I get a little excited over this because this is one of the biggest jokes in history. The reading of another's mind, motivations and intentions is the formal definition of telepathy. Telepathy is in because these things have been confirmed in humans too. And the definition is the capacity to read others' intentions and motives. And this is the fundamental definition of telepathy. Do you like that? Do you know why this is going to change everything? If these interpenetrating things, it's going to take a while for this to be worked out. But telepathy now has a physical basis that science had denied that it did have. And now that it's a physical basis, in the materialistic science, it makes it a legitimate phenomenon. Who's going to study it?
Scientists, using the scientific method.
Oh, yeah. I can name you 7 intelligence organizations that are going to be dumping money into telepathy research. Shall we start with our own? The CIA, DIA, the Mossad, MI6, well, MI5 too. Do you think they're going to, you see, remote viewing got started because they thought the Soviets had something like this, and Washington finally said, well, we'd better do something about it because if they get ahead of us, then we're going to have a problem. That was the basic funding issue for when remote viewing got started in the 1970s during the Cold War. Now, do you think that a lot of people are going to say, well, let them do it? I wanted to talk a little bit about the future. I could say more, like, can the motor cortex be trained? I have a nice little thing here. Do you know what the motor cortex is? It's right up here, by the way. The premotor cortex is just in front of it. Do you know what else this is up here? The prime chakra, yes. Which extends through the auras. I'm going to read you a definition of the motor cortex, which you probably haven't ever heard of. Motor phenomena are regarded as necessary in all mental processes. Whatever sense the stimulus is given, the impulse has to go through the motor image centers. Did you know that? I did not know that for a long time, but eventually I found out. But without the motor cortex, what would your body be doing? What? Dying, probably. Be a blob, anyway. Now, can the motor cortex be trained? Have any of you ever learned to ride a bicycle? Did you teach the motor cortex how to do it? And when the motor cortex learned to do it, what happened? It became automatic. Did you ever learn to drive a car? Yes, the motor cortex can be trained. If the motor cortex can be trained on anything, how did you learn to speak a language? That's the motor cortex doing this. The reason I had a little difficulty with Italian versus French and German and English, French and German and English all use the same mouth and tongue movements. Did you know that? But Italian is different. You have to build in a whole separate motor cortex response program for that, because easy. We say easy in French, and it's facile in Spanish, and it's facile in French and everything like that, but in Italian it's facile. And I said, why am I having such a tough time? I was trying to learn this in the Romance language motor cortex units over there, but you have to build a whole new one, right? So if you build a motor cortex program which matches what you want to do, it will become trained and it will become automatic. That is now beginning to be understood. That's what happens in good remote viewing training, by the way. You build a program into the motor cortex which takes care of the information signals and so forth, and you don't have that to start with, but you can create that and build it. Now, do you have some idea why, as this is my 5th swan song, and it may be my last, I wanted to tell you a little bit why the future is going to change with respect to all of these things that we've been mutually interested in. I rest my case. Are there questions? Last time I spoke, you drove me off the speaking platform before I was done. Do I have time for 2, 3 questions? Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about the contestant.
Well, I think you'd have to get that book. What is your question?
What exactly is it?
They don't know. They can talk about it. They can assign a name to it. And then they say quintessence, and that's the name for it, but they don't know what it really is. Do you know what love really is? It's an experiential feeling, and it's called, you assign a word to it, and then you think you can talk about it, and you know what the word means, and so you think you know what it is. But basically, it's an experiential experience. And if you've never had that experience, you won't understand the word. Right? Okay. The book. I bow to the book, by the way, because it's rather out of my expertise, and I think you should go to a direct source. Yes, sir.
You say this is going to change the future. How do you expect the future to change if we have this policy of no child left behind? They can't even get outside of math and science.
Well, at my age, I don't care anymore. Sorry, Bill. Yes, ma'am.
Translation question. I was wondering about the word entanglement and the Sanskrit language. Does it in fact translate precisely?
Yes, in this case, yes. And it is used, Sanskrit has 5 or 6 different words for the same thing, as this lady mentioned. And so, when you translate one of those words into English, you take the nearest English equivalent, and that's what you pop onto it. But most English words don't have 5 or 6 different variations of them, but Sanskrit does have that. But entanglement, which is actually a very old word, the early theosophists were using it, and a number of alchemical researchers of bygone years, metals get entangled. Yes, it's a perfectly good word. It's just very seldom used. And the other word that's very seldom used when things are translated English is interpenetration. But you can go to Sanskrit sources to sort this out, and I advise you to do that if you're interested. Yes, sir.
I admire you for your courage, but I want to ask about the future. Should people pick up on your work where you left off, or should they pursue their own style, like pursue their own?
Well, they do that anyway, anywhere, in any field. Everybody wants to do one-upsmanship. And so I don't blame them. I think that's fair, you know. I did my lot because I got paid for it. Well, a little bit anyway. And I wouldn't have done it actually, except a very highly placed person appealed to me saying, it's your national duty to do this. And I said, oh. I said, how much do I get paid? That went on for about 7 years, by the way. Any questions from over here? Yes, sir.
Do you ever feel like you affected a remote viewing target by viewing it, or is it just more like passively receiving information?
Well, we only have one confirmed event on that, and that's the famous magnetometer experiment. But when you're trying to, you see, the CIA wanted psychic spies. And we figured out we could get the person there by coordinates, which really did work, you know. But we didn't know if we ever affected anything there. But the magnetometer result came about. A lot of you are not familiar with it, you know. I was dragged off one day to the Bavarian Physics Hall at Stanford University down into the basement, and there was a magnetometer there, and the machine and everything, and they said, can you affect that? And I said, well, where is it? I can't see it. He said, it's buried in 5 feet of cement underneath your feet. It's surrounded by all of this and everything, and a super cooled shield and so forth and so on. And I said, how am I supposed to view something unless I can see it? This little recorder was doing this, you know, nothing was affecting this machine down there at all, and it was just doing this and doing this, and I said, well, I can't see it. So I said, let me try and draw it out on a piece of paper. So I drew it out did a little sketch of it, and as I was doing the sketch, I could see the sketch, which means my motor system could see it, I suppose, and this little wavy line said it went. This doctor, I forget his name, he was such a nice guy. He had 5 or 6 doctoral students witnessing this. There was a famous physicist from China. There was Hal Puthoff and myself, and maybe someplace else. The doctoral students took one look at this and turned and left the Bavarian basement of the Bavarian Hall of Physics without a comment. And one of them bumped into one of the big supports of the roof there and practically knocked himself out. And then, what's his name was looking there, and then Puthoff, you know, Puthoff's always gung-ho. He said, can you do it again? So now I knew what it looked like. I'd never seen a Josephson Junction before in my life, and that was what they had down there. And so I just looked at it, and I scanned this down here, which put me into quantum reality contact with that down there. Is that right? Good way of saying it? So when you can see something here, you're in quantum reality contact through all of these interpenetrating things, and you can get the information of it. And it did another little weak jiggle. And then the physicist said, then Puthoff turned to the Chinese physicist and said, would you sign you witness this right here? And so that broke the quantum reality type of thing. But that was one shorter way of saying that quantum, actually, I've never quite understood what they mean by quantum. You know, it's just a physical unit, word they've signed to some sort of unit and everything. But it's part of the physical and other interpenetrating universes. So if you can see something, it will, I suppose if you have enough power like I do, affect this thing over here. Anyhow, Do you know how many Washington guys came out to visit SRI after that event? I think they made a ferry, plane ferry for it. Any more questions? Yes, ma'am.
Have you looked into the future from the standpoint, perhaps, of trying to understand the implications of the Mayan calendar in 2012? What is
I have tried to do that. I think they just got tired of making a calendar so far ahead of time that they stopped. I mean, that was what, 900 AD or something like that, and they were doing this calendar up here, and said, what the hell is it? We're up to 2000, and that's 45 generations ahead, you know. Is this a waste of time or not? Nothing that I've seen has picked out that year precisely, but aside from that, it could be the date that the Greenland ice pack slips into the Atlantic Ocean, which is going to maybe stop the calendar or something like that. But intellectually, I can see the romance of that, you know. But in my perception, I don't have any particular impression about that particular date. Yes, ma'am.
When you lecture, I mean, when you refer to the inner guru, were you referring to necessarily always one individual in the body, or also one who might not be?
Well, the literature that I was referring to was referring to the one in the body. But there is a Loka that I didn't mention to you that is part of this interpenetrating thing, where what they call these deities that can talk to you if you get your mind up there or something. It's all interpenetrating, you know. And this is all in consciousness too. Just because we have these areas blocked off or retarded or something or not turned on doesn't mean they don't exist in each of us. So, yes. All right, I'm getting tired. Any more questions? Are you getting tired? Another question here.
I've been reading recently about Hermes Trismegismus, and there seems to be some confusion about the time period in which the man lived. Have you ever looked at that?
No, I haven't looked at it, but there is a lot of confusion about where in and if he existed. I was interested in those when I was 25, those kind of books when I read all those, but he's now out of favor, by the way, because they can't pin him down, really. There are several entities like that. Have you had enough? I thank you for... Yes, ma'am.
The phenomena of the crop circles, do you know or can you tell me, is there any message with that?
No, a very famous crop circle person visited me about 10 years ago, and we went to dinner, and I didn't say anything, he didn't say anything about crop circles, and finally at dinner he said, Ingo, what do you think of crop circles?